Yeah. So there was a point,
So
yeah,
yeah,
there was a point where you guys tried to like backpedal on the agreement, and it's like you
yeah,
sent the paladin, like the to talk to the town council.
right,
You've arranged this. His dudes are now driving this boat for you.
yeah,
You're not, what's done is done. I'm not going to retcon stuff because you're trying to
yeah.
win the game.
But there was a
Sorry.
mo. There was also there was a moment when the two where the paladin and the druid were talking to the town council members, and the sorcerer and the and myself, the rogue, are on the ship. So we're not in. We're miles away from each other.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I had a thought, and I was like, oh, like we'll negotiate. Like, if you're not going to give us the ship, at least let us sell instead of giving us, the reward, let us sell these goods in your town for profit. But they were stolen goods, and try to get the town council to let us sell, fence these stolen goods. And that, and I just, well, that moment's gone. That moment has to
Mhm.
pass. I didn't
Yeah.
even bring it
Yeah.
up. I didn't even say it out loud because I'm not there. My
And
character's
that's good
not
play.
there.
That's good. That is good D&D play.
It's
Like
just,
respecting that.
yeah, we could talk about it later,
Right.
like, oh man, I had this idea while you guys were there and blah, blah, blah. And that's the fun of like having those situations where, like one character thinks, well, here is obviously what we should do next. And everybody else says, I'm not going to do that. So, and we were talking about just in a numbers way of, when you have an even number of party members,
Hmm.
there can often be 2-2 splits. And there can a lot of times be 3-1 splits where one character is like for instance, say you have a paladin and the paladin's like, well, I really think we should do this. But you have some other guys that are of nebulous moral fortitude and they say, yeah, well, okay, goody two shoes. We're not going to do that. So now you have, some interesting tension in the party with the characters, hopefully, and not with the players, hopefully. But like, and that's the thing. So because
Yes.
I can let it go. If somebody like if the group outvotes me, yeah, I get it. That's cool, no problem. But your character is always welcome to do whatever the heck they want anyway, which a rogue would probably do, or a paladin might even do. So,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you have three roguish characters and one paladin, the paladin might decide to go to the town council and cough up everything that's going on anyway. That's perfectly legit motivation, right?
Or you can always put that stuff in your back pocket too, and like either you tee up like the game progresses in a good way, or it doesn't, and you get to have your like "I told you so" speech. And either way, it's satisfying.
That's a good
Um,
way to play it too. Yeah, that's right. I
and
knew
I
this
like
was
I
going to
gravitate
happen.
towards this one because you had those choices are evident. They collapse, right? Like you're making those choices now. You're gonna have like there was a moment where you asked the crew like you were like, we're going to Salt Marsh. And they were like, we can't go to Salt Marsh. You guys are smugglers now. Like there was a long drunk conversation with the first mate of like, you guys are terrible smugglers. You can't just go to town in the middle of daylight and expect to not get arrested. We have
Right.
a ship full of bad, like untaxed contraband. And it was like, okay, well, where do you go to get supplies? It's like Pirate Town, baby. And then you guys were like, do we go to can we go to Pirate Town? It's like, you could fucking absolutely go to Pirate Town. Everything will be different if you do, but like, I will absolutely run Pirate Game. But you have to just you can't be both. You
Yeah,
can't be
you're
the
gonna
good. You can't be the sheriff and the pirates.
at
You
some
can
point
try
you
to thread that
collapse
needle,
the
but
wave function, and
yes,
then this reality is this. So you measured the
exactly.
position of the particle, and that's where it is. And now you can't go back to Schrodinger's half alive cat,
Yes.
It's just not
And
gonna happen.
that choice is there again and again and again. Like you go to the town council, you've only met two out of five of them, but one is like clearly this like he was a gladiator or a soldier or something, and he was implying that the other like softer, more like noble kind of counselor that was in the office when you guys walked in maybe knew a little bit more about the smuggling operations than uh he wanted to
Officially
admit.
recognized.
Yeah. So when you went back to town, it's like, okay, where are you going? Who are you going to talk to, right? And you talk to the Law and Order guy, or are you going to talk to the guy who's like, maybe on the take or in charge of the smuggling operation or something,
Yeah.
um,
Or sympathetic to it.
or sympathetic to it,
The
or
well, it's funny when you mentioned the guy who was the former gladiator with the peg leg, you mentioned that it wasn't a peg leg, it was like a tree stump. And it's so funny because I
yes,
actually was writing the word tree trunk when you said tree trunk. It was tree trunk. And I was like, that's pretty cool coincidence. But yeah, there's some neat visuals there. And I think that's the fun thing too. And that's one thing that you taught me. And I think that maybe we both learned from Dolmenwood is that sometimes you only need three adjectives, right?
if they're the right ones, you don't need much.
So
And
we
I
know
think,
that
and that's what's wrong, or that's what I don't like about the box text. That's why I keep going back to like, look at this shit. Like you're doing less in 500 words than we've learned. I mean, and it's 40 years of learning, right?
yeah,
It's kind of apples and oranges to compare the two, but like in something like Dolmenwood, which is like the the bleeding edge of TTRPGs right now, as far as I'm concerned, three bold words are doing more than that giant block of text.
yep.
Thank
Especially
you.
for uh characterization.
Yes.
And I mean you can go on and on about like set description, and you can give your characters things to do by saying there's a candle here, there's a book here, there's a letter opener here. You can give them little things to interact with in the environment. They're not necessarily going to invent those things. And if there's a MacGuffin in there, you need to put that in there. Otherwise, they're not going to pick it up. If they don't know there's a letter opener and it's got somebody's name on it, and that's a clue, then they're not going to go, is there a letter opener on the desk? Like, who's
Right.
going to do that? Right. But
Right.
like, that's one of the things that I just glanced at this. Okay. So I haven't read this cover to cover yet, the new 2024 rules. But what I've seen so far, I like a couple things. So um, one of them is that they have standard arrays for classes,
Love
and
it.
that is going to make things really easy for beginners, right? So like maybe you don't roll up your first character. I know it's anathema. I mean, that's a fun thing to do. There's no doubt about it. But maybe if you just know you're going to be a barbarian, you go jump in there. You got an 18, or I mean, a 15 in strength, you got an 8 in charisma. I mean, you don't have to figure that out. You don't have to go to some chart on the internet, figure it out. It's like, boom, there it is. What's your starting gear? It's right there. It's right there. There's this little box of text, and it's just like it does the work for you. So you're not going background, acolyte. It'll actually, and they've broken that down too. So like if you're a charisma, it'll show you like, okay, if you here's some things you might want to choose from if your background, if you're going to play a charisma character or if you're going to play a dex character. It's really I want to get it more into it. What I'll do this week, if my work doesn't take up too much time, is get into this and make a couple characters and
Mm.
and just do it the shortcut way, because in less than a month I'm going to be teaching it anyway. So maybe I'll teach this to the kids and then show them the other stuff as well. Because you can always go back and roll, you can always go back and
Yes.
reinvent. And part of the fun of D&D is playing different characters. And it doesn't have to always be perfect the first time. You don't have to have the optimized character. And in fact, arriving at those kind of optimized builds is a process. And for me, part of the fun part is the process
Hmm.
of learning. So for next week in this campaign, for sure, I am going to build a new character
Mm.
out of this because I want to learn it. And I learn by doing. I can read this book and that'll be informative. But until I sit at the table and play the mechanics of it, like if I say I want to be a warlock I want to be a warlock druid mix. I don't know how that's going to play out until I build it and play it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it's a
I'm
whole new world out there, guys.
Yeah, unpopular opinion. I just cleaned up. They're not next to me, but like I like pre-gens, especially for new players.
Yeah,
Like I think the best introduction in D&D is here's or like pick your guy, right? Like,
yeah,
oh, I like that I like the elf with the bow. Cool. Like that's a level of interaction I want.
yeah,
And then you play the game for once.
yeah,
And now maybe I kill that guy. Right? Maybe you get your feet wet on that side of the game too, or whatever. Or you go make your own version of that guy. But like you should play the game before you build a character. I
yeah,
firmly believe that. Nobody does it. Everyone spends 3 hours building a character and making 100 mistakes because they don't understand the systems. I like the new character sheet. I do like skills being under the ability score that they use. I understand some people don't like it because it feels like more restrictive, but that was always there anyway. You can still change it out and use strength to intimidate or whatever you like. It seems more functional. It seems cleaner. I like the standard array. I like that they start with classes. I like that it's the most important thing that's going to affect your character is the first thing you focus on, and
yeah,
then we'll talk about species,
yeah. What
and
are
then
you
we'll
gonna
talk.
do? Right?
Yeah.
What do you want to
Yes.
do? Do you want to
What?
be
Yeah.
the face of the party? Do you want to be the sneak in the shadows? Do you want to be the noble warrior? Do you want to be, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
Uh,
Because species means even less now, and some people like are up in arms about that. I think it's fine because like every argument against it contains like the counter argument of like, well, unless you were adopted, unless your parents died in some tragic accident, and like, oh, like 90% of backstories, unless you were left like you're an orc that was left on the orphanage of the human church. Like, yeah, dude, that's a fantasy trope for a reason. Like your background has more to do with
oh,
than anything. Like you can be the
sure.
smart orc or the strong gnome. Like, of course,
How
every
many
people want that.
how many video games have you played where you're an amnesiac,
Right,
right? I mean,
right.
because we're starting from you're the player, you don't know what your backstory is. So
Yes.
that gives the player a way to identify with that character right at that moment. I mean, Robert Ludlum did it with Jason Bourne for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Like he made a
Mm-hmm.
whole thing out of the fact that Jason Bourne didn't know who he was. He just
Right.
had these skills all of a sudden, you know?
And because of his background, right? Even though
Yes.
he was
He
not in
didn't know what
touch
it
with that
was.
background. He
Right.
knew he's like I'm like that scene in the I mean I know the movie's better than the books, but that scene he's in the restaurant, he's like, I know that guy can handle himself in the fight, and I know every exit out of here. Like,
Mhm.
who the fuck am I?
Yeah.
Like that's
Why do I know that? Normal people don't look for the fire exits in a
right,
theater. They just come in to watch the movie, right?
right.
I was a
Because
movie
your
theater usher,
job,
so I know where
your
fire exits are.
experiences have built those neural pathways in your
But
mind much more.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So like for me, why do I know how to get in and out of a restaurant? I worked in restaurants.
Hmm.
Why do I know how to get in and out of a movie theater? I worked in a movie theater in high school. Like that's not everybody's experience, right?
Right.
But that's logical to your character, right? In real life. And if you can translate that into D&D, you are head and shoulders, you're off to the races. Like
Yes.
that's what role playing is for me, right?
And that's what I'm leaning more and more. I mean, if I can, I wrote this book about backgrounds. Like I'm
Yes.
leaning more and more into background as the key to like connect the character and the game world and like the player and the character. Like that's the missing link. And they did it in 5e, but I don't think they did it. I don't think it clicked. The ideals, bonds, flaws. I was really excited about on paper. I almost
Mhm.
never see them come out in
Most people don't
play.
use them. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I
Um,
pre-gen a character on fastcharacter.com, it comes up with random bonds and flaws and ideals. And that's like one of the first things I look at.
mhm.
I love those random, like how do I take these four things and put them together into like a coherent backstory? Like that's a really great, fun thing to do. It's like, oh, my brother was eaten by a dragon. Oh, okay. That's it. That's interesting. That's gonna give you
That's gonna
some,
inform my worldview, at least about dragons.
there's gonna be some motivations here, possibly,
Yeah.
Yeah. You're spurned by an ex-lover. Your family is known for its scandals, was one I read the other day. Like,
Mm.
that's awesome. Like trying to
Hmm.
get from under the shadow of like a bad news story where everybody recognizes you. How do you continue to live your life, right? Or like the one that I've used a couple times with a couple different characters that I really like is the folk hero
Mm.
background, but you're not really a hero. Like you people think you're a hero, but you didn't earn it, right? I love that one where it's like now I have to go out in the world and prove to myself that I am the hero everybody thinks I am, but I'm not. And it was funny because I had this one character I was playing, and he always came in second. He could
Mm.
never get the big boss kill. He would like load up a bunch of hit points on the boss, but then somebody else would take the kill. And so it was almost this it happened a couple times randomly, and then it just became like, oh, I told the DM, I'm like, I want this to keep happening. So pull the make sure he has one hit point left before, at the end of my round so that he can't do it. So it's his story. It's like it's continuing. He never gets to do it until he gets to do it, and then it'll be his like redeeming moment.
And that's advanced level play right there.
Yeah.
Not the like, oh, I didn't get the killing blow, like, oh, one hit point like I gotta my brother-in-law, like I'm not doing it. It's just the dice are doing it. Like it's happening. He leaves all sorts of enemies, be it a big bad or a little grunt, like with 1 HP left. And it became a thing, and he leans into it, and we all lean into it narratively. And then when he gets the payoff, it's awesome.
Right.
And when he doesn't, it's fun. It's more fun than like
Yeah.
the guy who's sniping the kills, right? Like, and that's the good stuff. Like that is when you kind of like break through to the next level. You level up because you've had enough experience to understand like, oh, there's actually a lot of fun to be had in this, going against the expectation, going against the trope, right? That's the key to like a good narrative or a good joke, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
Well,
very close to each other.
right. So if you're a writer and you're trying to write these things, you're trying to write modules, you're trying to write characters, you're trying to write anything. Your main character has to fail sometimes. You can
Right.
ultimately win, but if you don't make the character have a struggle, it's not a story. It's not an interesting story. If you just walk in and like you're James Bond, you blow everybody away, it's all over. It's is that fun? Yeah, it's fun to shoot like enemies while you're skiing backwards down a slope and they have snowmobiles, and that's fun. Don't get me wrong, but like when you're like playing Texas Hold'em and they poison your classic drink, and then you have to go resuscitate yourself in the car, and then you have to walk in and pretend like nothing happened. That's an interesting story too, like
Yes.
in some ways more interesting, even if it's a little far-fetched.
That's why I hold up Die Hard as like one of the best action films of all time, because the protagonist gets his ass kicked the entire movie. It's just there's a slow degradation, and he wins, right? But he's fucking miserable the whole time. He's got glass in his feet before
There's a
like halfway through the
genius
movie.
there's a genius to that movie on so many different levels. We can do a
Yeah,
whole video about that. But like, how did Tiernan say, like, how do I? And he's the director. How am I going to get this guy barefoot? And so they introduce it with a casual conversation on an airplane, which also informs the character, right? So the characters come from the East Coast. He's going to the West Coast. This West Coast business dude tells him to do something organic, take his feet off, feel the ground with his feet where he is, blah, blah, blah. Something a New York City tough cop would never do, right? And he does it, and it has consequence, right? Just something little like that. And that you can do in D&D as well, right? But
yes.
one of
And
my
he's still
favorite but one of my favorite scenes is when the FBI agents are going to storm the castle. They're going to storm the thing, and the one FBI agent, they got all their guns, and he runs through like this flower bed, and he gets pricked by like a carnation or something. He goes, "Ow!"
it's
That's a very human reaction, right? And it
yes.
just shows, like, it foreshadows how these FBI agents are going to get their butts kicked in the next scene, right? Because they're little fragile, you know what I mean? And so they're human. it's not like, you know, immovable object against unstoppable force, right? They're
Right. Right.
flaws.
And those are fun to watch. And those are I mean, it's fun to play D&D on God mode for a one shot, right?
Yeah.
For a session. But after like you don't play games that you can't lose. If a game's too easy, you lose interest in it, right?
Yep.
Like, and
Yep.
the one other lesson I'll pull from Die Hard, because this is now the Die Hard show, um, the perfect reluctant hero, right? He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be the guy. He's not having a good time. He's not on an ego trip or like,
No, he's there to save his marriage. He's not
and
even there to be a cop. He just has
he
those
acts
skills.
and he does the thing and he still reluctantly does the thing. And I think a lot of players who are trying to play the like reluctant hero, anti-hero don't or expecting someone else to make that step for them. Like John McClane does the thing every time. He's not happy about it. He'd rather
Mhm.
be doing something else, but he's still an action hero, and that's what you need to be. You're the protagonist of this story. Drive. Don't be afraid.
Yeah. And
Act
the
like you're afraid, and then
yeah,
push the button.
and the humor, right? So the
Yes.
humor of it, and that we find humor in a couple. Well, we go on all day about that. But one of the ways that we find humor is we identify, right? With the human element.
Mm,
You know, we're
mm.
not the guy usually that rushes in, kills all the bad guys. That doesn't happen in real life, right? We get to do that in D&D. So, but then if you throw a couple human moments in there, like in this campaign last week, my character comes over the railing, dispatches an underling. The captain's there, right? And his like first officer or whatever, they're running around. Uh, uh, I pop up and say, "Ha ha," and I shoot, and I miss, or he like takes the bolt out of his
No, you hit him. You hit
yeah
him.
shoulder and says, "Ha, +1 this," and he throws it down to the ground. And then I'm like, "Ha ha ha," and then I act tough, but as soon as I'm out of like line of sight, I run.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like that's what my character would do, like be like braggadocio, but in real life, I got to get out of here. But I don't
This dude
want
has
him
way
to
more
see
hit
me
points than I
run.
thought he did.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to see him run, him to see me run, but I'm going to run. And those moments are, that's a human moment, right? So,
Yeah.
so making your characters have those little, uh, that's why I always love to have a dump. I always love to play with the dump stat too. It's
Yes.
like, because, smart, you might be, smart, pretty, or agile, not all three. Pick two, right? So pick two. It's way more fun. But remember the
Yes.
third one you're not good at, because that's going to
Yes.
inform a lot of decisions. And then you're going to talk about those things later. You're going to talk about the time when you tried to jump on the dragon's back and slipped and fell off. That's going to make it more interesting than the other.
That's what you'll remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys remember some of this stuff in your campaign, and you can put your stories in the comments below. We love hearing from you, but I
Please.
think this is a good place for us to call it quits for this week. Otherwise, we'll go on all day talking about Die Hard.
Hold on.
That'll be a fun
I
episode.
have three more points about Die Hard.
Oh, go ahead. We can talk about that all day. Best Christmas movie ever.
Yes.
All right. We all agree about that. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.